So the parsha this week is Parshas Toldos, and it's a very, very significant portion. Some very important things are going on in the portion. But just to begin with, we'll do the summary. So the summary of Parshas Toldos. This one, if I hadn't have a chance to write this myself this time, but I took this from a website called Torah.org. So this is broken up through the 7 Aliyahs itself. So first Aliyah, so Yitzchak is 40 years old at the beginning of the portion when he marries Rivka. And after 20 years, Esav and Yaakov are born. The parsha jumps from their birth to Yaakov's purchase of the firstborn rights from Esau at the age of 15. Didn't realize how young he was. The second Aliyah then moves on to the parsha returns to the story of Yitzchak and Rivka and the famine which forces them to settle among the Plishtim, which is the region on the west side of Israel, which actually is in the same area as where Gaza is today. That's where the Plishtim resided. Yitzchak, like his father before him, has a moral confrontation with Avimelech, after which his fields are uniquely prolific and financially successful. Yitzchak's financial success leads to jealousy with the Plishtim neighbors. He redigs Abraham's wells, resulting in a confrontation with the Plishtim over water rights, and he moves back to Beersheba. And then Hashem comes to him in a dream, confirms for Yitzchak the future of his children, and Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim, and his general Pichol approach Yitzchak to make a peace treaty. And the treaty between Yitzchak and the Plishtim is celebrated. The parsha returns to the story of Yaakov and Esav. And when Esav marries two Canaanite women at the age of 40, bringing disappointment to Yitzchak and Rivka, and this is the major part of the portion, 21-71, where Yaakov and Esav are 63, and Yitzchak is 123. Yitzchak blesses Yaakov and Esav, and the parsha details the duplicity of Yaakov and Rivka in fooling Yitzchak, which is the big sensational episode of this, but we're not going to go into that this year. We've done that previous years, and maybe in a year or two we'll go back to that. But that's always a very provocative area of the portion, how Yaakov acquires the blessings through what looks like duplicity and cunning. But anyway, Yitzchak blesses Yaakov with the spiritual material gain of blessings, and after which Esav returns to discover Yaakov's plot, and he receives his own blessing for material gain, and is determined to kill Yaakov. Rivka, fearful for Yaakov's life, convinces Yitzchak to send Yaakov to her brother Lavan in search of a shidduch, a wife. Yitzchak confirms on Yaakov the future of the Jewish nation before his departure to Lavan. And then finally, Yaakov departs for Padan Aram. Padan Aram is the location where Abraham came from. It's otherwise known as Haran. The larger area is Haran. So he goes back to Padan Aram, where Esav now, and then Esav stays, and he marries the daughter of Yishmael, his half first cousin. So that's a summary of the portion, and of course, again, every little piece of this deserves a lot of attention and study and discussion, so we can't do everything. I'll just say one thing, though, that just with regard to the blessings, we should always emphasize the fact that the blessings being given to Yaakov and Esau, there are two different types of blessings which were ultimately given. And, again, the dynamics of how they were conferred is for some future years. But I wanted to emphasize, or just mention again, I think we discussed this last year, just to appreciate the difference between the two types of blessings. Yaakov received blessings, but when you look at the actual psukim, the verses, the nature of the blessings look very similar. So, for example, if you have a Chumash, it's in chapter 27, when he gives the blessing to Yaakov. This is chapter 27, verse 28. And actually, we spoke about this very verse last year, but I'm going to focus on a different point right now. Verse 28, it says, "May God give you of the dew of the heavens and of the fatness of the earth, and abundant grain and wine." So that's the blessing which he ultimately gives to Yaakov. And then the blessing which really he was thinking he was giving this to Esav. So it's not really relevant whether he knew who it was. He believed that this person deserved this blessing, and he thought that it was Esav who deserved this blessing. And then when we contrast this blessing to the blessing which he actually gave to Esav afterwards on page 141, verse 39. So he says, behold, this is to Esav now, behold, the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and the dew of the heavens from above. So those two blessings, or these contrasting blessings, don't look so contrasting after all. Because to Yaakov he says, the dew of the heavens and of the fatness of the earth. You should receive the dew of the heavens and the fatness of the earth. And eventually he gives the blessing to Esav, the fatness of the earth and the dew of the heavens. Sounds very identical. The two differences which stand out is that the sequence is changed, and the other difference is in the blessing given to Yaakov, he mentions Hashem's name. Hashem shall give you the dew of the heavens, and in the blessing to Esav, he doesn't mention Hashem. So there's a very short comment over here in the art scroll quoting from Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, which is really, I think, it's just a very succinct, very important explanation. It says, unlike the blessing he gave to Jacob, Isaac did not say that God would grant Esau's blessing, which would have implied that it would be given under divine providence and guidance. Rather, Esau's good fortune would come in the normal course of nature, and that's the reason why he doesn't address the sequence. Why the sequence change is different, but the dew of the heavens, the fat of the land. But in the first verse to Yaakov, Hashem's name is there, and in the second verse, Hashem's name is not there. But this really speaks to the difference between Yaakov and Esav, and just to appreciate the blessing. Yitzchak and Hashem does not want to give a blessing to Esav. The difference is that they have two different natures and two different functions in the world. They're both the ancestors of the Jewish people and the rest of the world. And one of the hallmarks of the Jewish people, are the foci of the Jewish people in our mission in this world, is to bring godliness into the world. That's the primary function of the Jew, to bring godliness into the world. And therefore, we have to, this is the avodah of our lives, is to always to see the Yad Hashem and to understand and to appreciate the providence of Hashem in our lives. That's the modus operandus of a Jew in receiving his bounty and receiving his sustenance and parnasa, to always see the hashgachas Hashem. This doesn't mean to say that everyone can do that, and not everyone is enjoined to do that. It's good to appreciate it, it's good to always to thank God, but the real mission, the sole mission of the Jew, is to always do that. The nations of the world, Esav is not enjoined, in a emphatic fashion to do that, and therefore the blessings and the brachas which come to Esav are not necessarily going to be perceived as coming through divine providence as much. The blessings will come, and he's giving the blessings to Esav, but he's not given the blessing that he's going to be able to see constantly the Yad Hashem. This is the role of the Jew, to always to see the Yad Hashem. And when I say that, I'm being careful. This does not mean to say that the rest of the world should not see the Yad Hashem. They should also see the Yad Hashem. But this is definitely the craft of the Jewish people, to always be living in that shelter, in that understanding of the providence of Hashem in our lives. And therefore, even when brachas and bounty and panos and all these different things come, it should always be with that mindset, that understanding, and to be able to see it and to appreciate and to experience the providence of Hashem in our lives. And that's the blessing which is being given to Yaakov, because he is the one to hold that baton of kedusha, of sanctity, of holiness, of presence of Hashem in the world. That's our mission. That's the mission of the Jewish people, the descendants of Yaakov. So, just wanted to point that out. So let's go further, though, because there's, notwithstanding the retrospective appropriateness and the hashgacha pratis, the divine providence appropriateness of the blessings going to Yaakov, and these different blessings, and Yaakov becoming that leader of the Jewish people henceforth. But nonetheless, Esav is very upset about it. He's very angry about it. You see how the Pesukim describe his anger and his seething, enmity towards Yaakov, and he wants to kill him. So he doesn't kill him. We know he doesn't kill him, and the story is going to go further in the future portions of how they eventually meet each other and how they come to some sort of a reconciliation. But at the end of the portion, then another thing happens, and it's like it's one of these sections which are buried and not really recognized, not really looked at, because it's the end of the portion. So the very end of the portion in Shavi, in the seventh Aliyah, So this is the end of the story when when Yitzchak realizes and Rivka realize the enmity that Esau feels towards Yaakov, and then Yitzchak instructs Yaakov to then leave where they are, Beersheba, and to go back to Padan Aram to find a wife over there. So it says Yitzchak summoned Yaakov and blessed him, and he instructed him, and he said to him very emphatically, do not take a wife, don't get married to anyone. He was 63 years old. It's interesting. He wasn't married at that point. He said, don't marry anybody from Canaan. Go back to Padan Aram, to Haran, where I came from, and marry someone over there. Not just marry someone, go to the house of Besuel, your mother's father, and take a wife from there, from the daughters of Lavan, your mother's brother, and Hashem will bless you. And that's what he instructs him. And then it goes on and says that Esau saw this. Esau was cognizant of this blessing, this additional blessing which he was being given. This discussion about what that additional blessing is all about. But he's cognizant of this blessing which, again, Yitzchak gives to Yaakov, and that he sends him to Padan Aram to take a wife from the daughter of Lavan, and the instruction not to marry anyone from Canaan. And he hears all this, he sees all this, and he sees that Yaakov obeys his father's wishes, and he goes off. And then the end of the portion says, and then Esau himself also recognized and saw the disdain that Yitzchak, his father, had for the wives that Esau had already taken from the daughters of Canaan. Canaan is Israel, where they were living at the time. He'd already married some women from Canaan. And then he realizes in this the fact that Yitzchak is instructing Yaakov so emphatically, don't marry anyone from Canaan. So that's when Esau realizes, it comes to the fore of his mind how upset his father must be, when how much distaste he has for these wives that he's taken already. And then he goes ahead and marries the daughter of Yishmael. He marries the daughter of Yishmael, Machalos, the daughter of Yishmael, and that's how the portion ends. So it's a bit of a mysterious thing. What's going on over here? What's the backstory and the subtext of all of this? But before I do that, let me just zero in on one particular pasuk, which really is a gateway into a very, very fascinating subject. So chapter 28, verse 5, the very beginning of this seventh Aliyah. So I'm going to zoom in over here. Yishlach Yitzchak es Yaakov. Yitzchak sent Yaakov back to Padan Aram, and he sent him to Lavan, ben Besuel, the son of Besuel. And then it says, Lavan, who's the brother of Rivka, and she's the mother of Yaakov and Esau. Now, you don't have to be a big scholar to realize the redundancy of all of that. We already know who Rivka was. We already know, the verses beforehand, I just actually read one of those verses before. We already know that Rivka is the sister of Lavan, and we already know that Lavan is the brother of Rivka. We certainly know that Rivka is the mother of Yaakov and Esau. So it's very, very, stands out very, very poignantly, this redundancy. He says, go to Lavan, who's the brother of Rivka, your mother, who's also, and she's the mother of Yaakov and Esau. Completely redundant. And we know we don't like redundant words. We don't even like redundant letters in the Torah. Every letter is significant. So what is the message over here? So commentaries discuss it, but the one commentary which I want to discuss with you is the commentary of the Or HaChaim. The Or HaChaim is a famous commentary from, I think, the 1500s, and he's printed in all of the major Chumashim, and he was a Kabbalist as well. So we're going to go into a little bit of a Kabbalistic idea over him. I'm going to try and explain it on a more practical and psychological, simplistic level. But before we got to the Kabbalistic idea, he explains very simply. He says that the reason why the Torah is emphasizing who Rivka is, that Lavan is the brother of Rivka, and Rivka is the mother of you, Yaakov, and Esau, your brother. That's all redundant. So he says, because Yaakov is thinking to himself, he's being sent by his father to go back to Haran, and to go back to Lavan. Lavan, they knew, was not a good person. Lavan and Besuel, his father, are the notorious rogues. Some of the notorious rogues of the Chumash. So Lavan is a Rasha. We speak about him in the Haggadah. Lavan HaRasha. Lavan is a. We're going to see more about him in the future portions. He's very dishonest. So he goes down in history as not being the most righteous of people. Lavan Harasha. And Basul also, his father, is also. Can you imagine being told by you're very, very honoring of your parents. Your father tells you, I want you to go marry, go to such and such a place, go to that neighborhood, go to that place over there, and look for a shidduch, the daughter of some horrible, some nefarious character. You think, well, why to marry someone like that? Go into that, marry that kind of family. So, in response to the potential claim or argument of Yaakov back to Yitzchak, I should marry a daughter of Lavan Harasha, Lavan the wicked one. So to preempt that, that's why Yitzchak says to Yaakov, don't forget, don't be so dismayed by it, because don't forget that this Lavan I'm telling you to go back to is the brother of your mother, is the brother of Rivka, that Tzaddikas Rivka. She also came from a Russia. Her father's also Besuel the Russia. So don't be so, hold your horses. Don't be so quick, because it's possible to have a righteous person coming from a wicked individual, because Rivka herself is a righteous person coming from the wicked Besuel. And in case you say to me, okay, that's all fine and good, but to marry someone, even if this daughter of Lavan would be righteous, would she be so righteous enough to be able to sire children and generations of righteous people, to be the mother of the Jewish people? Hold your horses, because who is this Rivka? She's the mother of Yaakov and Esav. Despite the fact that truth she has an Esav as a child, she's also your mother as well. So it's very possible for the daughter of a Russia, a daughter of a wicked person, to be able to be righteous, number one, and to be the mother and the ancestor of righteous generations. And that's why the verse emphasizes that Lavan is the brother of Rivka, and Rivka is the mother of Yaakov and Esav. To emphasize this point, says the Orach Chaim, that righteousness can emanate from wickedness. And that's really the bottom line. Righteousness can emanate from wickedness. And Yaakov is being sent to a wicked environment, to a place of immorality, to a family of immorality, of Lavan and Besuel. But that's where his wife is going to come from, and that's where the future of the Jewish people are going to come from. We find this many times throughout Tanakh, this phenomena of righteousness, of holiness, coming from impurity. I mean, that's a theme which we see over and over again in the Chumash. And it's what the Orach Chaim articulates even more over here. I'm going to read it to you inside, because he talks about this Kabbalistic idea. The Kabbalist idea called Nitzotzos HaKadusha, which we've spoken about before. And that is called holy sparks, which is like packets of the divine presence, which is present in every aspect of life, every aspect of existence. They're little packets of holy sparks of the divine presence in every fiber of existence. So I'll read the translation over here. So he says that it's important for you to realize, and he's explaining why specifically. I mean, there are different options of where Yitzchak could send Yaakov to marry a wife. I mean, the obvious question is, why doesn't he just tell him to marry someone in Canaan? But we know that Esav himself expressed the fact that Yitzchak was not happy with him marrying daughters of Canaan. So there's obviously something which is worse about Canaan, but maybe there are better places. I mean, if we all know that Lavan and Besul was a unrighteous, unholy family, so then why Bedafka? Why specifically go there? So he says in those days it was permitted and appropriate to take a wife from an idolatrous family. At that time, the holy souls trapped among the idolatrous nations were not yet extracted from their place of captivity. Now, this concept of holy souls trapped, this really goes back to a much earlier concept of Adam Arishon, of the first man, that when he descended and ate from the tree of knowledge, so then all of the souls, all the different dimensions of the soul of Adam Arishon became scattered and dispersed all around. And this is the ongoing mission, as he's going to say in a second, the ongoing mission to retrieve these sparks of holiness throughout history. And he says, at that time, the holy souls trapped among the idolatrous nations were not yet extracted from their place of captivity. But subsequently, due to Abraham's extraordinary devotion to God, he was chosen to be the patriarch of Hashem's people, and Abraham's family was recognized as the family where the holiness established its residence. From then on, the sparks of holiness would be redeemed by attaching themselves to the family of Abraham. And that's the purpose that he's being said. So Yitzchak is sending Yaakov to go and further the mission of retrieving the sparks of holiness, to bring those sparks back into the family of Abraham. He goes further, he says, nowadays, speaking today, in the 1500s, but certainly even today, nowadays we have reached the day for which we had hoped. Meaning after the Abrahamic family had been established, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Jewish people had been established, we're now at that point now where the family has been established, in the sense that the roots of holiness have blossomed and have developed into the Jewish people. We are the Jewish people, and the Jewish people was established at Mount Sinai. The staff of the great splendor has bloomed, and the tree of life, the family tree of the Jewish people, is now identified with Yaakov and his descendants. As the verse says in Devarim, for Hashem's portion is his people, Yaakov is the measure of his inheritance. So the Jewish people are now this body of holiness and are replete with the holy souls, both male and female. And one therefore need not turn, because he's explaining why, in contrast to back then in the days of Yitzchak and Yaakov, they were specifically going and basically marrying members of idolatrous families, deliberately seeking the souls which were trapped, so to speak, over there, to pull those souls, those divine souls, into the Jewish family. He says, but now today, he says, one does not, you don't need to turn deliberately from your own people, the tribe of Israel, to other families of the earth to search out an appropriate mate. In other words, a person who says, okay, fine, if there's holy souls everywhere to be found, so does it make a difference who you marry? No, that's not, that applied back then. Today, the holy sparks of holiness, it's not appropriate to go around and to search out an appropriate mate from the families of the earth. And even if there are sparks, even if there are sparks of holiness that remain at large among the nations of the world, when they emerge in the world, they gather and come of their own volition to the Jewish people. We find this, that people come to the Jewish people. People come to become Jewish. Like what's driving the convert to become Jewish? What's driving the convert? We say there's a spark of holiness inside of them that is drawn towards holy. They want to become more closer to God, come closer to the Torah. But we don't seek them out. That's why we don't look for converts. And once they do convert, it becomes clear that they had been the lost sparks of holiness, that they had always been truly belonged to the Jewish people, and they were now coming back to the Jewish people. So that's the dynamics of the retrieving of those sparks today in this context through marriage, etc., through families. But back then, Yitzchak was charging Yaakov to go back there deliberately to go and do that, and that's the idea. So that's why he's being sent back there. Now he goes on to go further to say that this ideal could not be achieved in Canaan, because Canaan, the level of impurity of Canaan was devoid, he says, devoid of any holy souls, and therefore it was a very immoral and detestable. It's a fascinating thing. Again, just affirming this point we said before, how holiness comes from impurity. It's an amazing thing. Think about this, that the patriarchs are told, don't marry anyone from Canaan. Where's Canaan? Canaan's Eretz Yisrael. The holy Eretz Yisrael, the holiest land in the world, was once the most unholy land of the world. Right? And that's why he says there were only immoral and detestable, immoral people in the land of Canaan. In light of this, Avram and Yitzchak resolved not to take wives from them, since there was no holiness to be found over there. He says, this is the deeper meaning of what it said when it says that the curse which was given to Canaan back in the portion of Noach, when the verse says, "Cursed is Canaan," that means that they were completely devoid of any form of holiness. That's how the Or Chaim explains it. So fascinating idea, but it explains why he's telling him to go back to Haran, Padan Aram, and the special concept of the retrieving of the sparks of holiness which are latent inside that nation, and that's going to become the Jewish people. So this really does segue into this concept of what does it mean. That's what I was trying to say before, that what is the practical take home, and how can we take this Kabbalistic idea? I'm looking at Steve over here, that you're a klipa, right? Klipa is you always bring the word klipa. Klipa is the Kabbalistic idea of spiritual impurity and husks which surround us, which is and this is the mission. This is how Kabbalah looks at it. We have this charge to be able to pull out, redeem spiritual sparks, packets of holiness, which are inside everything. So there's a very practical dimension there. The practical dimension of it is the idea of being able to find goodness and find holiness. There's a pragmatic way of doing it. It's a way to find holiness and purity in every aspect of life. And many examples of this. One which I like to use is on Shabbos, for example, on Shabbos, one of the 39 malachos of Shabbos is not to sort things out. You can't, if there's a big pile of a mess there's let's say there's like a pile of socks, and you didn't put your socks together before Shabbos, and you have to sort things out. You can't do that. It sounds funny. Why can't you do that? The rule is you're not allowed to, in that process of sorting, the specific prohibition, the specific malach on Shabbos is taking out the bad from the good. So another example, I think we've spoken about this before. Why do we eat gefilte fish on Shabbos? What's the reason? What's the origin of gefilte fish? Not because there used to be a fish in Europe, in the streams of Europe, called gefilte fish, and that's why we have gefilte fish. Gefilte fish is because it's ground up fish. The reason why it became customary to have gefilte fish is because first of all, it's important to have good food on Shabbos, to have lots of delights, to have meat and to have wine and to have fish. So if you have fish with bones in it, the only way to eat the fish, you've got to pull the bones out. And that's called bora, because you are selecting the negative, the waste from the positive, and that's the malacha of bora, not to select the waste from the positive, from what's good. But you are allowed to take the good from the bad. That's the rule of bora. So on Shabbos, the overarching message is take the good from the bad. We should never take the bad from the good ever. We should never do that. But always take the good from the bad, especially on Shabbos, where Shabbos is a day of holiness. Especially so is it worse to take the bad from the good. But this is called boreh. Now, Kabbalistically, the process of redeeming the sparks, packets of holiness, is called birurim. That's the Kabbalistic term they use. We are pulling out the holy sparks of life from every aspect of life. And that's what on Shabbos we bedafka specifically take the good from the bad, not to take the negative from the bad, from the good. But this is the mission. And there are many ways that we can find the holiness in things. I mean, obviously Judaism and Torah has so many mechanisms with which to be able to extract the holiness. But one obvious way is with food. Now it's interesting, food, which is so materialistic and so self-serving in one respect, is yet the vehicle for great experiences of holiness, even in the portion itself. Look at how the blessings are conferred to Yaakov and Esav. Yitzchak tells Yaakov, he says, go out, and he tells Esav, it turns out to be Yaakov, he says, go out and hunt for me and bring food back to me. Why does he have to give it? Why does he need the food to give the blessings? Because the proper usage of food is to elevate the world and to find holiness in the gashmias, to find a holiness in the physical and the mundane. But that's done certainly by only eating kosher foods, but also making blessings as well. But making a bracha, making a blessing, is a very powerful mechanism to be able to pull out the kedusha, the sanctity found inside food. And therefore, the blessing, the preparation, and realizing that the food is giving us chiyas, is giving us life. The dependency we have on it. It gives us life. Every time we eat, it's an opportunity to be able to appreciate the life force of Hashem giving us life through this food. But we do that especially with making a bracha. So through blessings on food. But also there's another. Actually, I want to read to you one line over here which I picked up from somewhere. It says, he says, in order to extract and refine the sparks of holiness hidden in the material world during this era of exile, which is today's times, throughout history, scholars have studied the laws of prohibition and permission. I mean, the whole involvement of Torah study is also this process of extracting goodness or holiness from unholiness. Because the process of Talmudic learning as well, especially, is we are analyzing, trying to pull out, he writes over here, to extract that which is permitted from that which is forbidden. That which is pure from that which is impure. Ultimately, Torah study removes the divinely imposed veil so that a clear adjudication of the law results. But this is in the realm of study. But, another thing which we have to think about with this is that if this is the kind of the paradigm of existence, the paradigm of existence is to find the good from the bad, to take the good from the bad, which really implies that the default posture, the default position of the world is that there's actually, darkness and concealment and chaos, right? And if our goal is to take the good from the bad, then the bad is present as a default on a default level, and that's the reality. And that's obviously we all understand. I don't have to tell you that's the state of existence. That there's chaos in the world, chaos in our lives, and our role is to be able to find the holiness. So I want to segue into something people may know this week there was a very famous person who passed away, and that was Aaron Beck. Anyone heard of Aaron Beck? Aaron Beck from the Beck Institute. He was the founder of CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and he was 100 years old. He lived here in Philadelphia, so he's 100 years old. But he was cognitive behavioral therapy is obviously a very, very major area of psychotherapy. And really, I was thinking about this morning when I was preparing the class, and thinking about that because what is CBT? What is cognitive behavioral therapy? So the C of cognitive therapy is cognitions, and cognitions means seeing things accurately, is perceiving things accurately. And that's what the whole kind of field of that therapy is. It's predicated on the idea that we have cognitive distortions, and there's a default posture of human beings. And if you research this, it's actually not so clear what they say is the cause of this. I'm going to say what I think the cause of it is. But the default posture of a human being when looking at life and himself, herself, at life and relationships, if you don't do anything about it, the default posture of a person, unless they've been trained otherwise, but the default posture of a person is to see things negatively. That's the default. You don't put effort out, by default a person will see things negatively. And he coins he coins the 10 cognitive distortions. The 10 cognitive distortions, which are, for example, actually I put it up on the screen over here. I'll share the screen. Lost it. I'm sorry, 1 second. Sorry, do that again. So these are I'm not going to go too much into this, but the all or nothing thinking, you look at things in absolute black and white terms, overgeneralization, you view a negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat, mental filter, you dwell on the negatives and ignore the positives, you discount the positives, you jump to conclusion, you do mind reading, you do fortune telling, you magnify things, you minimize things, should stay labeling, personalization, and blame. This is for a different time to go into this in detail. But the cognitive distortions, we have all these distorted thinkings of things. And that gets us into bad places. It gets us into bad relationships. It gets us into feeling bad about it. It gets us depressed. It gives us anxiety. So the default is, distorted thinking. So I was thinking to myself, why is that? But to me, this is part of the chaos. This is a part of how Hashem made the world. Hashem made the world in a chaotic way. And the Kabbalistic picture of the world, the Kabbalistic mission of the world is to, in the chaos, to pull out the sparks. How do we pull out the sparks? By using our mind. By using our mind, that's another way to find the sparks of holiness, of goodness in everything which happens. So that's a Kabbalistic way of looking at CBT. We are using our minds to see the good, to have accurate perceptions of what's before us and not default into a negative place. Because if we default in a negative place, we are staying in that chaos. We want to come out of the chaos. We want to find the sparks of holiness which are latent in every experience. And there's always good to be seen in everything. There's holiness in everything. There are sparks of holiness in every experience. And even if a person has done something negative against you, and something has hurt you, or we've done any negative, we've hurt ourselves, done something stupid, there's always going to be positive in that experience. Not to deny the negative, and not to rectify the negative, and not to seek amends, and not to forgive, and not to apologize, etc. But to dwell on all of that is where we get into this mess of the cognitive distortions, and we have to try and fix that. We have to reframe things. The reframing is the capturing of the holiness, capturing the good in every situation. And that's my explanation as to where that comes from. So this is what we're trying to do. So I thought also, just going back to the end of the portion, I found a commentary. I was looking at different commentaries at the end of the portion, talking about this reaction that Esav has when seeing that Yitzchak is blessing Yaakov, sending it back to Padan Aram to find a wife over there. And then his reaction is he sees that he's blessing him. He sees that he's listening to him, and then he goes ahead and he marries. He marries someone else. He marries the daughter of Yishmael. Doesn't divorce the daughters of Canaan for some reason. I'm not sure, but he takes a third wife, marries the daughter of Yishmael. So the question which I saw posed by a very famous commentator called his name is Rav Simcha Zisel of Kelm, from Europe, very famous one of the Bali Musa. So he wonders. He says, "You think about this. Like, what stopped Esav from killing Yaakov at this point? I mean, he's taken the brachos from him. He's now being told by his father, Yaakov is being told by his father, you go back to Canaan, you go marry this special, woman from Padan Aram. Doesn't say that to Esav. So you could see that, you could imagine the seething hatred that he's going to have. What stopped him from killing him right there and then? He doesn't kill him. What held him back? What held him back from killing him? So he writes over here, he says that, as backdrop, he says, what keeps us on the straight and narrow in life? What are the ingredients which keeps a person on the straight and narrow? So he said, what keeps us on the straight and narrow ultimately is emunah, faith. I mean, that's the ultimate, person is a man of faith, a person of faith. They are, an anchor connected to God. That's the ultimate. But, that's hard to hold on to. So he says that there are two ingredients which hold our faith in place. One is the mind, a strong mind, and the other is a good sense. He says seichel and chush, a good mind and good chush, a good sense. Intuition, I don't exactly know what he means, doesn't elaborate on that, but a strong mind keeps us on the straight and narrow. Again, it goes back to keeping the mind strong so that we can see things properly. When the mind is strong, we can see things accurately. Not to say we're not influenced, but when the stronger the mind is, the more able we are to be able to analyze things and hold on to the things which are necessary to be held on to. And he goes on, he says that Esav was surely, filled with hatred, would have killed him, but something held him back, and that was his seichel. And what I found this so interesting because is that we don't often look for, or we don't often draw positive inspiration from such negative personalities. I mean, Esav is not, well, actually one of them we do. We learned that Esav excelled in kibud av v'em, in honoring parents, honoring his father, right? So that is a positive thing we learn from him. We do learn that from him. But the other positive thing, which Simcha Zisel Kalm says we learn from Esav, is that he had a strong seichel, he had a strong mind to hold on to the honor that he had for his father. So in addition to honoring his father, despite the opposition coming to him with this desire to kill Yaakov, nonetheless, his strong mind held him steadfast and didn't deviate, and he was patient, and he gritted his teeth and didn't do anything to Yaakov at this particular moment. His seichel was strong, and he held on to what he believed to be what he believed or what he was practicing till that point of honoring his father, and didn't touch a finger onto Yaakov whatsoever. And he says that's what we learned from Esav in this episode over here. I want to read the words inside. he says that he must have been. He's a Bal Hergish V'das Rechava. He writes about him. He says that, I want to just emphasize, Simcha Zisel, the people I like to quote are people who are lauded as being great thinkers, great ethicists, and great spiritual leaders of our Jewish history. So Simcha Zisel of Kelm was one of them. And he writes, he says, that about Esav, he must have been a Bal Hergish God, a tremendously sensitive human being. V'das Rechava, and had a strong mind. V'hike gedulas aviv ma'od, he recognized the greatness of his father exceedingly. L'nicha sichlo, he didn't allow his mind, his mind, his strong mind, did not allow him to do anything against the wishes of his father. You see from this how a strong mind can have such an impact on a person, even on a Rasha, even on a person who's evil like Esav. So if that's the power of the mind, a strong seichel had on on Esav HaRasha, how much should our minds have an effect on us? Ubeprat al Ish Yisrael. We must take this lesson, he says, and recognize the power of our minds and to use our minds wisely and to allow our minds to keep us on the straight and narrow, to uphold our faith. That's what we learn from Esav. So it's another example of, again, there are there's a plethora of opportunities to find sparks of holiness and goodness in every aspect of life. Now, of course, we don't charge first foot forward into situations of unholiness to then go ahead afterwards to find the holiness in the situation. We have a Shulchan Aruch, we have a Torah, we have a guide book which tells us what you should do, what you shouldn't do. But if we find ourselves in circumstances where, or we are past the circumstance, we find ourselves in situations where, here we are, so now this is the situation, it's by fate or by whatever happened, it is what it is. So now, find the holiness. We are reading now the story of Esav. It's after the fact. Is there anything yes, there's something even to learn from Esav. That's what we're learning this from Esav. There's always something to learn, there's always something to gain. Even in the trying, most difficult of circumstances, there's holiness in every part of life. In the darkest places, there's holiness, and the way to access that holiness is with our minds, is using our minds to try to create, try to reframe, and to reframe those cognitive distortions that we're seeing the world with, and to see things in a more positive light, in a more holy light, in a purer light. We should all be zocha to be able to see things positively, to see holiness, and to use our minds in that way. And we should ultimately see the Geula Shlema very quickly in our days.